because there was a willingness there to bet on people. Mr. Kaufman wanted to invest in people because he believed that people could rise and do extraordinary things. He believed very strongly that people will tend to live up to or down to your expectation of them. But he believed it, and he believed it strongly. And so he spent a good bit of his time as the visionary head of the business convincing people that they could be more than they thought they could be, and making it possible for them to do that. He also really meant this business of those that produce share. Everybody in the company had stock options. Everybody, and this was now in the 70s, long before it was vogue. Nobody was doing it. Everybody was on stock options. Everybody was on bonus plans. We had everybody on a stock bonus plan. So there was a pay for performance kind of mentality. And he believed strongly that leadership is about what you do, not about what you say. And that where people fall out with their leaders and with their companies is when people say one thing and do something else. And so it was his absolute desire to make sure that whatever it was you were saying, you were doing. And you needed to be consistent with that so that you met those, whatever those expectations were that you created, that you met them. And to be careful not to set expectations that you couldn't meet. He believed strongly that there was risk enough in business, and the risk ought to be borne by the business, not by the people in the business. And so he had a no layoff philosophy. He said, it's my responsibility to manage the business so that I don't have to send anybody home for lack of work. Wow. I mean, that was extraordinary at the time, and it would be extraordinary today. But he was able to do that for 40 years in his business. Now, I said before that it was an overnight success that took 40 years to create. So you can tell that it wasn't all a smooth ride. When I joined the business in '73, propevrin hydrochloride was selling in the neighborhood of about $30 million a year. It was the company's, therefore, #1 product. Stock was selling at $53 a share. I accepted the job in December at $53 a share. By the time I showed up in February, it was $38 a share, and by May, it was $11 a share. Why? The FDA had begun to question propevrin hydrochloride. Not because of any safety issues, but they were questioning efficacy. How effective is this product, and can you measure it? And the challenge was you can't measure a peripheral vasodilator's involvement and effect on cognitive function. Even though the physicians might tell you that in their observation of their patient's behavior, they do better when they're taking the product, and this is primarily for a geriatric population. You couldn't prove it. So that began to be a serious problem, and it became clear very soon that the FDA's challenge to that product was going to be serious, and it was going to be long-term. And so it became necessary to start thinking from a strategic point of view, how are we going to turn this organization into a more successful organization long-term when its core product is being challenged by the FDA? And that required some strategic rethinking of the business. They had acquired over the years 4 or 5 what I'd call loosely related healthcare businesses, which it became necessary to sell in order to get the capital in order to start doing some more serious pharmaceutical research. So we went through a period of what I'd call strategic assessment and realignment and divested ourselves of 5 companies. Each one of those, though, was done with that same philosophy of treat people like you'd want to be treated. We went to the management teams of those subsidiary companies and said, here's what we want to do and here's why we want to do it. Would you like to buy it? We'll help you if you want to. And every one of the management teams bought into the decision. We helped finance them in that purchase, and many of them became very successful.
Mickey, I'd like to ask a question about how you kind of institutionalize these principles in a company that's growing very rapidly. So.
Well, we decided that if we were going to make those real, we had to have that be the persona that got displayed to people from their very first contact with the business. You know, if you stop and think about treat people as you would want to be treated, it forces you to begin to develop an empathy for people. You got to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, if that were me, how would I think about that? How would I look at that? What would I want to know about this job, this company, this manager, before I decided to bet my career on it? Mm-hmm. Recognizing that any new job is going to be a bit of a risk, and it's, you know, I need to understand what those risks are. Even though we did finally develop you know, mission statements and that sort of stuff and print them on the wall, long before that, we said before we ever put anything on the wall and printing, it ought to be so well recognized and ingrained in our day-to-day activities that people will look at it and say, oh, okay, no big deal. And to do the things that, you know, in a practical day-to-day sense, really did demonstrate that you meant what you said. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody, and his uncle always says people are our most important asset. But when times get tough, what is the first thing they cut? I mean, they cut people. But at Marion, we went to extraordinary lengths. Even in 1980, 81, and 82, when the country was going through a severe recession, mm-hmm. actually a more severe recession than we're going through now. And we were waiting patiently with bated breath for the FDA to approve 2 new products that we had done all the clinical research on. And to get ready to launch those products, we'd staffed up and trained everybody because we knew that it was important to be able to ship immediately once the FDA approval came. And the FDA kept delaying and kept delaying and kept delaying. So we had all these new people around, and we had them trained, and there was sort of nothing to do. So what do? You don't lay those people off, but you do go and you sit down and you say, okay, guys, here's the problem. Now, we have a no layoff policy and we have a no layoff philosophy, and we don't want to do that, but here's the real problem. We've got more people than we have work right now, so can you help us figure out what to do about it? Is there anybody who would like to take some extra time off? We're willing to do that and continue your benefits if that. So there were a number of people that said, yeah, I haven't visited my mom in Arkansas for ages. I'd like to go down and spend a couple of weeks. So we had a number of people take some voluntary time off. We had some people decide as a group that they would like, with our supervision and help, that they'd like to work 4-day work weeks instead of 5-day work weeks. So we didn't use a one-size-fits-all kind of an answer to the problem. Mm-hmm. To maintain the workforce, treat them like we'd want to be treated, and to be able to have them ready to go the moment the FDA said approved for sale. And it worked beautifully. Mm-hmm.